Ladies and gentlemen, and sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerskis, Sports Deck Chicago, one of the couple 2 or 3 best podcasts around. So grab yourself a nice cold one and a bowl of sausage, park your keister in your French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your Chicago Bears post-game episode that we're going to do every week. I guess let's first take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, is the Rockford Ice Hogs. Hockey comes back to the BMO Saturday, October 11th. For game information and tickets, go to icehogs.com. Welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. We're here with Lester Wolfong from Windy City Gridiron. So, Lester, initial thoughts on the game?
Just a rough all-around game. It seems to be the pattern this year. The offense it looks good in spurts, but there's just no consistency. The defense looks good in spurts, but there's just there's a lot of breakdowns, and the special teams. Well, that's been pretty bad all year.
Yeah, I mean, I was just jotting down some notes, and it started off on the special teams with the quote-unquote, I'm going to put quotes on there because I still don't believe it happened, the illegal block on that nice punt return from Santonio Holmes. I rewound it, and I can't see where it happens. And then I was reading a tweet from Mike Pereira who said, I didn't see any illegal block.
Yeah, there was a couple of really bad block calls in the game. There was one on Marshall later in the game, and they called them the blind side blocks, which is, I understand why that was the rule was put in. It's basically one of those defensive receiver or type calls, but at some point you got to use some judgment. And if it looks like it's clean and it was really violent, really a big hit, but it was clean, you got to let those go.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to call it a blindside block when you hit him square in the numbers on the front of his chest. I mean, it's the player's responsibility to be looking a little bit. I mean, if you hit him from the side, or if he's getting ready to engage in a play, but if he's just not paying attention and you get him clean in the numbers, it shouldn't be a legal hit in my opinion.
It's one of those things where if you don't make that block, that guy will make a tackle. What are you supposed to do in that instance? It's from the first day of football, everyone's taught to keep your head on a swivel. And again, like if that block's not made, those players are going to make the tackle. You have to block it. There's no other way around it. You have to make that block if you're on the field.
And I believe they mentioned something that this officiating crew was the #1 flag-throwing crew so far, and it's not surprising. They threw a lot of really questionable things. There was the phantom face mask on Christian Jones, where watching it looked like he snapped him because I see that he went the violent change of directions, but it looked like he just had him by a shoulder pad. And
yeah, the only thing I think on that play is the ref may have thought he grabbed the bottom of the helmet, and that's technically also a face mask penalty. But it happens so fast. I could see the ref making that mistake, but still, that's just a call. I would like to see more stuff be able to be reviewed because the refs are really bad right now. So you have to have to give the coaches a chance to throw the challenge flag a little more often if this is the case.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, I actually made a note that this officiating, not just against the Bears, but all the NFL season so far has just been really bad. I mean, it hasn't been much better than when we had the replacement refs, which is if you're going to win and lose, you want it to be on the field. You don't want ticky-tack calls. You don't want it to be in the referee's hands. And the referees have just been really flag happy this whole season so far.
I think part of it is that's the league that the NFL trying to create, trying to make it a much safer league. But by doing that, by adding some of the brand new rules, you're putting the refs in a situation where they have to call things that they think may be a penalty, and then just hope that they made the right call.
Yeah, and going back to special teams, there was the Teddy Williams punt fiasco that was just the epitome of everything that's gone wrong with the special teams so far this year, with initially a penalty for getting there early and then nobody hustling to touch the ball or touch the guy who touches the ball.
Yeah, it was terrible. That's a play. If you're looking at it, it kind of you think of the play with last year with the Packer game where the ball's just laying there, and it's just at that point just fall on the ball.
And then Chris Williams and the one return he had at the to end the first half just looked really bad. I mean, ran square into the middle of traffic, and he's not a big enough guy to be able to take any sort of hit, and goes down with a strong breeze. I don't think he's the answer at kick returner either.
He's a smaller guy. He has to really get going, but then he has to also make some moves. He can't just run it into the pile there. He has to actually make a move, and I think he may be a little better as a punt returner, but it seems like the Bears are set on having Holmes back there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm fine with Holmes, and when he's gotten chances and they haven't been called back by penalties, he's done all right. It's just that Chris Williams is not the answer at kick returner, and I think part of it is him, and part of it is Joe DeCamillis, the system he runs, because Devin Hester is a similar guy where he's not strong enough to be able to run it up the gut. He needs to make moves, and he needs to use his speed, and he didn't do very well under Joe DeCamillis, and it's continuing again. It's a systemic problem.
There are some changes to the rules back there, but the good coaches adjust, and I haven't seen it from him so far.
Yeah, and I mean that's something else that has to be addressed. And this team as a whole, it seems like they get one phase going, improve, and then the other two regress. So one game the offense looks good, but the defense and special teams are bad. And one game the defense is okay, and the offense and special teams are bad. When are they going to get it together as to all three phases?
There's time, but the famous thing is, you are what your record says you are, and unfortunately the Bears are 2-3, and they look like an average team right now, and they're good enough where they could pull off some wins against some bad teams, but teams that are average to good are going to beat them.
And onto the defense is they run. There's a lot of soft zones going on in the backfield, and which is fine if you're able to get some defensive line pressure, which the last few games they haven't been able to do for whatever reason. So you have just seemingly wide open receiver after wide open receiver after wide open tight end.
Yeah, it's been rough so far. Just a lot of, but if you have the guy blitzing all the time, there's going to be holes there too. So at some point, the players have to make plays.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like Mel Tucker needs to make some adjustments to sort of mask where their deficiencies are rather than emphasize where their deficiencies are.
Yeah, there's problems all around, from the coaching to the players. It's just, it's unfortunate. There are a lot of expectations for this team coming into the season, but so far, it's not looking like it's going to be a playoff caliber team. But, like we're talking about, it's early in the season. There's still a chance for them to turn it around. They have a chance to get some guys back, a lot that are hurt. If that happens, who knows what happens with the team. But, I think the Bills won today, so, there's still a chance in the division.
I mean, they still have to unfortunately play Green Bay again in Green Bay.
Yeah.
And that was just a debacle up there. It's just, their standard I think they needed to rethink their whole defensive scheme. It's every time they blitz, they always blitz in the A gap, and defensive coordinators who have a lot of success with blitzes send a lot of exotic blitzes from different places, so you can you're not always anticipating where it is. The Bears blitz A gap, and it's
the Bears are still even though they've gone away from the two deep zone look, they're still mostly a zone team. Usually with zone teams, you really rely on the front guys getting pressure, and that's still not happening with this team. I don't know what it is. They put a bunch of cash on the ends, and besides Young, the team's struggling right now to find some pressure.
Yeah, Jared Allen seems like he's still suffering the effects of his illness, which wouldn't be surprising. But he's going to need to pick it up if they expect to do anything within the division.
Yeah, he looked a little slow and sluggish to me, but like I said, it's to be expected. He was having a hard time, with his chest last week the what do they have? Why am I drawing a blank on what he had?
Who, Jared Allen?
Yeah. Pneumonia. He had pneumonia last week. So he looks sluggish, but that's to be expected. With Young, he's getting pressure, but he's the only guy that's getting any kind of pressure at all for the D-line. It's just really sad at this point with the Bears.
Yeah, and from last year, they've shored up the run defense a lot. I mean, there's still some issues there, but they've shored it up a lot from last season, and they still have the issue where they can't get to the passer, and it's really exposing the defensive backs. And it's fine if you can't get there and you've got all the wide receiver options shut down. But when you can't get to them and you're running a zone, there's going to be wide open guys, and you're letting yourself have some big plays.
Yeah, it's rough. The injuries have hurt a little bit in the linebackers. We saw the debut of Jones today at strong side linebacker. He looks like he still has a lot to learn, obviously. Chris Conte with his second concussion now at safety. So the injuries are starting to mount up on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and speaking the other side of the ball, I think we all know how much potent firepower that the offense does have. It's just they can't seem to put it all together, and I think a lot of it is sometimes Trestman goes to just odd play calls or way too conservative play calls.
Yeah, it seemed like this year, for whatever reason, it's just not clicking. Part of it is the injuries to Jeffrey and Marshall earlier in the year, but they're both healthy now. So the Bears should be clicking a little better. Let's see if this game was just the first game having all of his guys back, and then see if it gets better next week. I thought the offensive line did okay till late. Then at that point, the defensive line is just coming after Jay. But I thought Ola looked okay early. I thought Mills looked, he looked about as he's looked all year. He still has some problems over there with the really fast defensive ends. I think that's going to be a problem moving on. But if you're only having the one problem as an offensive play caller with the tackle, you can scheme around that. If the whole offensive line is going to be shaky, it's going to be tough. I think they did okay early. Got a little bad late. Let's see how they do next week after a full week.
Yeah, and I even think Slauson, who's a very good offensive lineman, had a down game. I think that ankle's still bothering him because he got beat on some moves, and it just looked like he wasn't 100% out there.
It's possible, with that the high ankle sprain, it takes a little while to come back from. It's possible it may bug him all year. It's a matter of if he can play through the pain, if he has enough flexibility in an ankle to move side to side. That's going to be the key. We'll see when Garza gets back if he has the same problem, because they already said that once he's healthy, he's going to be back starting. So we'll see how that goes too. Yeah,
and kind of an example of the play calling that didn't make sense to me is the one drive in the fourth quarter where they were backed up to their own end zone almost, and they ran the ball on first down straight up the gut, and they didn't have a lot of success doing that. the whole game, and they got nada. And then Kyle Long had the false start, and based off the way he fired off, rather than stand up and back down, and the way Jay Cutler was backing up to throw, I'm going to take a wild guess that was going to be a screen pass. And then they ended up having to punt the ball. And so it just seemed like it was very conservative play calling down there, and that when they've got a lot of mismatches, and they didn't, this game seemed to be a lot of the short dump off passes to either the tight end or Matt Forte, and they just kept going to that well, and eventually defensive coordinators are going to pick up on what you're doing and switch their scheme to stop that play.
Yeah, I expected there to be a little bit more Brandon Marshall. I mean, he's healthy. He usually, when he has a couple bad games in a row, he comes back really big. It seemed early that the Bears they had the one bad interception where they kind of, he was trying to go to Marshall down the seam. Then they didn't really go back to him too much. So I'm sure he's going to be upset all week. He isn't getting the ball like he wants to. We'll have to see if his ankle is bothering him. He said he was fine. He said he's healthy. He practiced all week, so you expected him to come out. But the Panthers were doing a good job on those guys. They played a lot of two deep shell, and had people out on the outside to help out. So they did a good job. So if at some point there's two teams playing, one team did a good job, one team did a bad job.
Yeah, and it seems like the Jets sort of discovered the kryptonite for the Bears offense, and it's if you send in a second guy over the top of Brandon Marshall and kind of really limit him, then that's the way of the offense. Is if it all goes through Brandon Marshall, even though they have a lot of talented weapons. Is if you can't get Brandon Marshall going, then you're going to stall them. They may get their yards, but they're not going to get all the points that you expect them to get.
They have so many playmakers on offense. You would think that they could scheme something where they're getting the matchups they want. If they're going to have an extra guy on Marshall, you got to hope that with between Jeffrey and Bennett, one of those guys are going to get a matchup they expect, and you have to they have to make them pay for doing that. But they haven't been doing it, and it's just it's mind-boggling with an offense that was as good as it was last year. This year it's kind of it's ranked in the 20s.
Yeah, and Alshon Jeffrey should be a matchup nightmare for teams just because of his athleticism and just his physical presence, and they don't utilize it in as much. I mean, they utilized his size in the second half against the 49ers, but they just haven't been utilizing it as much as you expect them to. And Martellus Bennett was just a ghost this game.
Yeah, it's rough. The last couple of weeks they had the injury report had no Jeffrey on it, so you think his hamstring must be better, unless it is bothering him, and then the Bears are just being really coy about it. But if he's healthy, he has to produce more than what he has been.
Hopefully, in a couple of weeks when we get Marquise Wilson back, that'll be a spark for them, because he looked great in the preseason and in training camp and such. Hopefully that's a spark.
Yeah, he has a lot of upside, but this is a guy that really hasn't done much in the NFL level. So to hope he can be that guy is a bit stretch. But I'm like you, I expect a lot of good out of him, and if he can bring him anything, it'll be nice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect him to come in there and be Jerry Rice, but to be a spark, because he's a guy with a lot of talent. They did draft him in the 7th round, but that was for other reasons. That wasn't football ability, and he looked like he took a lot of steps forward from last season to this season going into it. So, I don't expect him to be Brandon Marshall or Alshon Jeffrey, but if he can be that third receiver to open up the playbook and let them, utilize more plays and be another threat deep, then that's just going to help out Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey and Jay Cutler.
I'm looking at the numbers here, and it was for as much as there wasn't a big impact by Jeffrey, he did have the touchdown. He had almost 100 yards receiving, so he was out there, but it seemed like he wasn't making the big play when it had to. Then again, the Bears weren't really going to him when they needed a big play, and with Marshall, he has had the 5 targets, 3 3 catches, 44 yards. Just that wasn't enough. And with Bennett, he had 3 catches for 17. That's just that's pretty bad.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is when the going gets tough or it's a break, the play is breaking down, that Jay Cutler is going to revert to things that he always did. And Brandon Marshall is his safety valve, and he's going to try to force it in there. And I think part of the thing that Trestman's going to have to do is to incorporate other safety valves in there and get Jay Cutler to trust that the system's going to work. And part of that is going to be getting the system to work like a well-oiled machine. So Cutler does have that, sense of safety that he can dump it off to somebody and without having to force it.
Yeah, it seems like it was a lot of Matt Forte this week. He had 12 targets, 12 catches. But in the second half, the Panthers were really on him pretty quickly there. So, there has to be a secondary outlet there instead of going to Forte over the middle like they were doing this week.
Yeah, I mean, you saw that they started putting Luke Kuechly to shadow him, and you got to have you got to be a Superman cape to kind of beat Luke Kuechly. And on plays where you're expecting Matt Forte to break a tackle, he's not going to be breaking it against Luke Kuechly. You've got to scheme that, they made a chess move and you've got to make a counter move to change that and to beat it. And the Bears didn't do that. Yeah,
there has to be some more stuff with double moves, even by the running backs out of the backfield. They have to do something to get the linebackers, make them think twice. And there was not that this week by Mark Trestman.
Let's try to look positive, even though this was a painful loss. What's something positive that you took from this game?
We talked a little bit about the offensive line, and besides Mills, we got a little shaky late. I thought even with Michael Ola coming over, I watched him quite a bit during the game, and again late he had a few issues, but early on, when things were going good, he looked solid. And some of the stuff late with the sacks thing, they gave up 2 or 3 sacks in the fourth quarter. Part of that is just the situation of the game, but the O-line is coming along. Last year they started out obviously all 16 games, the same group. This year they've had a lot of changes. I think that's part of their problem. So many changes up there, even though they're playing okay. There's still these little things that they just don't know yet. They're still not playing on the same page with some of the twists. One of the sacks was because of a twist happening. I think it was just Ola and Slauson just aren't ready to play together. That's why the sack happened. But then with the quarterback play, there was a couple bad throws, but his overall numbers, they were right in line with the season so far. So you got to think it's another, again, he's growing. You got to hope he keeps growing, and you got to hope the offense can just start clicking on all cylinders.
I guess for me, it's I love the NFL draft, and I like to break down players and watch a ton of game film, and I like to think I'm fairly good at it for an amateur. But the one time I'm glad to say that I was wrong was I hated Ego Ferguson coming out of LSU, and I think he's been playing pretty well considering where they drafted him and what they expect out of him this year. I think he's played pretty well.
Yeah, he's been solid. He had a couple of really big plays in a row there. He seems to be really stout against the run, but his pass rush has been a little better than I thought it would be. And I want to see how the snap count played out, but I know the last couple of weeks it was mostly Sutton, and with Ferguson was backing him up. I think as the year goes on, especially if they're going to be missing Ratliff for any more time, I think those two, the playing time may be a little more even between them. But between Sutton and Ferguson, the Bears have a couple good guys for the future. Yeah,
and Sutton was a guy I loved coming out, and I thought he was a steal for the Bears, and I didn't like Ego Ferguson, but he's done much better than I ever expected him to, which is a nice surprise. And as far as the offensive line is, last year I thought it was great to see a whole offensive line play together the whole season, and Jordan Mills played very well for a guy drafted as late as he was, kind of thrown in there. But he was still the big question mark on that offense. is, do you think that once they get everybody healthy, or at least Slauson back into the scheme of things, and get the left tackle back, Jermon Bushrod, do you think there's a chance that Michael Ola moves to the right side and replaces Jordan Mills?
I think there's a chance, just because I think Mills is the weakest of the five that starts. I think as a coaching staff, you're not always looking to upgrade. You're doing a disservice to your team. So I think they have to look at the film. They have to see the problems that Mills is having. He's had, like I said, he's had a problem with the speed rush, the spin move, or something that he's having a hard time with this year. And then they have to look how Ola did the left side. And they have to think, is there a good time this year? Maybe the bye week. Is there a good time this year to make a change and have another guy that's an upgrade over there? But it's hard to make a change like that in the middle of the season. And the Bears, last year they didn't really do too many things like that, so it's hard to say they're going to do it this year.
Yeah, it seems like they sometimes get a little too stuck in situations and don't want to make the changes unless it's absolutely necessary. Yeah. Which, sometimes it's nice to have the even flow, but sometimes it's they're missing out on things that I think could upgrade the team, because I think Michael Ola has played well enough to be given a shot, and I think Jordan Mills has. I wouldn't say he's been bad, but he hasn't grown like I would have hoped he would have.
Yeah, I thought he'd be, he like we talked to you about. He had a good year last year for a guy drafted in the 5th round. I expected a jump and play from him. Maybe part of it was his surgery he had in the offseason. He couldn't have a full offseason to prepare. That may have something to do with it. But I'm like you. I have not seen the growth I thought I would see from him. He seemed to be making some of the same mistakes he made last year. He seems to me he looks a little worse than he did last year in some of the speed rushes. He's not getting his hands on guys quick enough. He's falling for the spin move too much this year. And an upgrade is needed at right tackle.
And one other thing that is nice to see is that Kyle Fuller's really come into his own. I said going into the draft before the draft actually happened, was Kyle Fuller, in my opinion, was easily the best cornerback in the draft, and I think he's playing really well. He's
a really good player. I knew a little bit about him coming out. I thought, like a lot of the mock guys out there, I thought he'd go a little later. But when the Bears picked him, I was surprised for about a second, and then I realized, he's just a guy that fits the scheme. He fits the personality of the Bears, and he has been great so far as a rookie.
Yeah, and with the huge height advantage, size advantage that Kelvin Benjamin had on him, he played him really well, and for the most part, did as well as you could expect on him.
The Bears had him shadowing Benjamin the whole day, if I remember correctly. I saw Fuller on the right and the left side. So, if they have that kind of confidence in the rookie right now, that bodes well for his future.
Yeah, and I was a little surprised when they drafted him, because I was sure that they were dead set on getting a safety.
Safety, yeah.
But when they drafted him, I wasn't upset at all, because I'd watched so much game film on him, and I absolutely loved him coming out of Virginia Tech, and I knew that they were getting a steal as a player. So he's another. I'm glad he proved me right, because he's been phenomenal for the Bears.
Yeah, he's like he has a good character. He has the bloodline. He's everything the Bears look for in a prospect. Plus, he has the skills to back it up. So this is a guy that's going to be a keeper. Obviously, he has Pro Bowl type skills. I'm not sure if I go as far as Brandon Marshall to put him in the Hall of Fame yet, but he has been really good so far.
And you could tell how coachable he is, because you could just see by when he's making his tackles how much he's listening to Peanut Tillman and watching Peanut Tillman, working with him, because his first thing is he makes sure he has that tackle, or he has the receiver spun in the wrong direction, and he's going right for that punch.
Yeah, I've been impressed with his overall ball skills, even stuff when he doesn't, actually get the strip, but when the ball arrives there, he's chopping down with the hand at the same time. And I think there was a play today down on the sideline where he did that, and he's just really smart. He has good instincts, for the position, and he's a player that he has a chance to be the rookie of the year this year on defense.
Yeah, it was the pass interference in the end zone, I think was way too ticky tack. I thought he made a good play.
Yeah, at some point you got to let them play, but with the way they're calling it this year, they're really making emphasis on that 5-yard rule, and but at some point it's something has to be incidental. You can't just not touch anyone, especially when both guys are looking up for the ball, and is it always on the defense? Is it sometimes going to be on the offense? At some point you have to let them play football.
Yeah, and especially when you get that close to the end zone. I think they were on the 10 or 12-yard line, so the field shrinks so much at that point that you have a lot of big, fast guys that they have to be able to occupy a certain amount of space. And when they had him on there, I don't think he was pushing him or anything. He had his hand up and made a good play. But it is what it is, and they made the call.
Yeah.
So, what do you have any other thoughts about the game?
I'm actually looking over the stat sheet here as we talk, and I was a little surprised to see the leading tackle for the Bears was Jared Allen. He had 2 tackles, 5 assists for 7 total. So, maybe he was a little more active than I thought. He just did look a little sluggish at times. I noticed, maybe that's something where the Bears noticed it too. So maybe he was kind of, shuffling in a little more, than I thought. I want to see the snap counts when they're released later on tonight. So, there's time. The Bears are 2-3, but the division is still there. The Packers obviously are playing really good. They're the class of it, but anything can happen. This has been a crazy year so far. So even at 2-3, if the Bears come out next week and they're 3-3, everything's fine now. The Bears are they righted the ship at least for a week, and with the Lions and Packers, you got to see what happens. But it's still early enough where they can make a turnaround. We just got to see if they can do it.
Yeah, and Jared Allen he was making hustle plays. I think the way it looked is he just couldn't get any push off of the offensive lineman. So I'm gonna guess that he's still feeling weak and from that illness, from the pneumonia, and but he was definitely making some hustle plays down the line. It just that he was quiet on the pass rush. As for me, it's a tough loss, but there's so many things that are fixable in the loss that when I rewatched the game film from the Packers loss, it was just such a rough game on the defensive side of the ball, and there was so many miscues on the offense that it could have been a different game. So I feel like the Bears had to play catch up in the second half rather than if a couple things would have gone differently, they could have, changed the way the game was played. But this game was, there were so many things that are fixable that you hope that they actually have productive game film and film sessions to correct those types of things.
Yeah, I think the offense is going to click at some point. There's just, way too much talent for it not to. The defense, again, I think the defense has had flashes this year, where they've looked good. In those 2 wins, there was no complaining about Mel Tucker in those 2 wins. It seems like every time the Bears, struggle, it's right away Mel Tucker's a quick guy to talk about. But, even on him, he's got to get his schemes a little tighter. He's got to get a little more creative with some stuff on the back end because, the pressure got exposed a little bit. But the special teams is very concerning because it's been bad all 5 games this year, and they have to figure something out because that's a big part of football. That's, as Bears fans, we should know that the third phase is just as important sometimes as the offense and defense.
Oh, absolutely, and especially now that they changed the kickoffs and you don't get a lot of kickoffs, it's any sort of miscue, and it's really amplified because you don't get a lot of chances. And it hasn't just been this 5 games, as they weren't that good last year either.
Yeah. And it's something they have to work on.
And I think the big downfall of Lovie Smith was his unwillingness and inability to work with the other side of the football and be a total head coach. And I'm worried a little bit that Mark Trestman is falling into the same trap of being only associated with the offensive side of the ball. And even though he's an offensive mind, he needs to be able to work with Mel Tucker on watching the game film and at least saying, hey, as an offensive guy, I'm seeing the game film. This is how we would attack the way you're playing defense, or things like that to have a second set of eyes in there. And I think he really needs to step back and do that to A, make this team better, and B, to, keep his job.
Yeah, you mentioned the Lovie Smith comparison. It's like those two are really, a mirror image of each other. Or one was a defense special teams, one is an offense guy, and you got to hope you find that Trestman can turn it around and put a little focus and emphasis on the other two phases.
Yeah, because you're always going to hire somebody that has a background in one side or the other, or even a special teams guy. But you have to be able to either bring in somebody that's just phenomenally good that you could turn it over to, kind of like what Mike Titka did with Buddy Ryan, or you have to be fully involved, like a guy like Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, definitely.
Who's going to be a Michigan coach next year?
Probably the way it's looking there.
So, is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, it sounds good. We covered a lot. I like it.
All right, thanks a lot for being on the show, Lester, and make sure you check out Windy City Gridiron. He writes some really great stuff there. I check it out several times a week.
Sounds good, Sean. Thanks so much.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Bye.
One last thing I want to talk about in this episode is the Chicago Blackhawks. We all knew that before the season started, which the regular season starts this coming Thursday against the Dallas Stars, is the Blackhawks had to get under the $69 million salary cap. They were over by about $2 million, $2.5 million or so. And so everyone knew that a trade had to come. I think the obvious choices were it was either going to be Versteeg, Leddy, or Oduya. And they ended up trading Leddy, and we all sort of knew that was going to happen once the Leddy was held out the last two games of the preseason. So Leddy was traded to the New York Islanders along with Kent Simpson, the goalie from Rockford, who is terrible. He's a dreadful goalie. And so they traded Leddy and Kent Simpson. Hawks got in return from the Islanders is three prospects. They got Anders Nilsson, a 24-year-old 6'5" goalie from Sweden, and he's right now playing. He's a restricted free agent playing in the KHL in Russia, and he's been described by EliteProspects.com as a huge goaltender that is technically skilled. He's got good hockey smarts, plays with calmness, and has good mental strength. Challenges the shooter and has been very consistent during his career, rarely having bad games. Furthermore, he's athletic and quite agile. So it kind of goes along with what they're doing in the NHL with having the bigger, more agile goalies. And so he's someone to look forward in the future and see if they can bring him over. Like I said, he's a restricted free agent that the Blackhawks now own the rights to. So they would have to sign him. Look for him to stay, though, in the KHL for now. They also got T.J. Brennan, 25-year-old defenseman prospect, and he's a really good offensive defenseman. He's got the howitzer for a shot. He's just a really good all-around offensive defenseman, but where he lacks is actually on his own side of the ice, and he's not that good of an actual defenseman. So it's actually kind of like a little bit like Leddy, where the guy can skate, the guy can shoot, offensive presence, but it leaves a little bit to be desired as a defenseman. So I don't know if we're losing out that much with Leddy, but getting T.J. Brennan. And then the most interesting guy that we got in the trade is one of the top prospects from the Islanders is Vile Polka. He's a defenseman, just turned 20 years old. He's Finnish, another Finnish kid, and he's seeming like an all-around good prospect here. Some of the things that scouts have said about him is he looks smooth and poised in the Finnish blue line. Finished the season at only 19 years old, so there's time to evaluate, but he already looks to have exceeded his draft slot. I'm completely on board this bandwagon. He's like the Kenny Morgan of this generation. He knows what to do. He will keep things calm, and he'll send the puck back on his teammates' tape. He said a lot of Islanders' goals recently have featured unnatural amounts of sliding defensemen and blown assignments. Polka is going to help with that. He's impressed me a lot.
there's always the question of Europeans translating to North American hockey. So he's being safe, but he doesn't think that's has anything to worry about with Polka. He's one of the highest scoring of the defenseman prospects for the Islanders, who have 3 decent prospects. So he's somebody that you're going to send down to Rockford and see what you have there. But I actually don't mind the trade at all. You had to get rid of Leddy. You got under the salary cap. You now not only are under the salary cap, but you have like $877,000 left to play with, and potentially at the trade deadline be able to make a move if need be, if you have injuries or you've got some potential holes coming into the playoffs, whatever it may be. But you have almost $1 million to play with. And like I said, who's going to be that last spot that Leddy lost in. Let's go back. Who's going to fill in that spot left in the defenseman pairings that Leddy vacates by going to New York Islanders? That last pairing with Michael Rosefall. You've got Adam Clendenning, Stephen Johns, Klaus Dahlbeck, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and Kyle Kaminski. And if you would have told me that Leddy would be traded in the preseason, I would have almost guaranteed that it was going to be Adam Clendenning going into that spot. But from all indications, it seems that it's going to be the first person that's going to be given the chance to be in that third defenseman pairing is Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who he's done something to show that he could leapfrog all the people in front of him. Dahlbeck, Johns, Clendenning, even a guy that's played around the league in Kyle Kaminski. So that's he must have shown something to Coach Q in practices that he's the guy. So he's going to get first dibs. And don't be surprised if there's a lot of switching up of the pairs, or even if somebody else does really well and they move Michael Rosefall out. But they're going to try to keep his leadership in there with a younger guy, or his veteran presence in there with a younger guy to kind of guide him along the way. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the months that they eventually replace Rosefall, because he was kind of useless in the playoffs. They also signed forward Dan Carcillo again to another 1-year contract, and they resent Tavo and Klaus Dahlbeck to Rockford. So I don't know why they keep bringing back Dan Carcillo. He can't fight. He's just a penalty machine. Sure, he's funny and he says a lot of ridiculous things on Twitter and in press conferences, but he's not going to protect teammates, because he's just going to go out there and get a penalty and actually cause them to be in a hole and have to play on the power play or the penalty kill. So it's a little bit ridiculous. I'm not sure. I mean, they've got a lot of young skaters that they can give a chance to, and they keep going out and trying to bring in Dan Carcillo. It's like trying to fit a triangular peg into a square hole or something. It's just not going to work. But whatever. It's he's probably going to get hurt and miss the rest of the season anyway. Any other news for the Hawks? Not really. We're looking at the start the season in the next couple of weeks. The rotation's kind of rounded out, and we're going to see a lot of guys vying for playing time in Rockford, which will be exciting because we're going to do a lot more coverage of the Rockford Ice Hogs games this year. Also, while you're at it, check out I was on last week after the Bears game as a special guest on our friend's show, Ball, B-A-W-L. It's another sports podcast for Chicago sports, and you can check them out at rookietv.com/ball, B-A-W-L. Check them out on iTunes. It's a really great show, great guys, really funny, a lot of jokes and humor in there. So it's definitely one to check out. And I guess that's about it for us. So until next time, thanks for checking us out, and bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like...
Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears! Oh, when the Bears go bearing down,